The crystalline spires of Luminara's capital city pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons in endless patterns of refracted glory. Prince Akiran stood at the highest observation deck of the Royal Science Academy, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the daily energy harvest. Massive collectors drew power from the Luminite core, the planet's beating heart of crystalline energy, converting its endless pulse into sustenance for millions. The door whispered open behind him. "The council awaits, Your Highness," said Thela, his chief advisor, her silver skin catching the light. "Your proposal for public access to Luminite technology has caused quite a stir." Akiran smiled, though his golden eyes remained serious. "Change always does, Thela. But we can't continue restricting our people's access to energy while selling it to half the galaxy." He turned, his ceremonial robes floating weightlessly around him, a testament to Luminaran mastery over gravitational fields. "My father believed in serving our people first. I intend to honor that belief." The council chambers were a marvel of Luminaran architecture, with walls of pure crystal that seemed to sing with stored energy. Akiran took his place at the speaker's podium, aware of his sister Celeste's sharp gaze from her seat among the High Council. She had opposed his reforms from the start, but he had never understood why. "Honorable Council," he began, "our people have lived too long in the shadow of." The explosion came without warning. The crystal walls shattered inward, their song turning to screams of breaking energy. Akiran was thrown backward, his protective field activating just in time to prevent the shards from reaching him. Through the chaos and smoke, he saw figures in stealth suits moving with military precision. "The core," someone screamed. "The Luminite core is gone." Akiran struggled to his feet, ears ringing, only to find himself surrounded by royal guards, their weapons trained on him. Celeste stood before them, her face a mask of grief and rage. "How could you, brother?" she demanded, her voice carrying to every corner of the ruined chamber. "To steal the core itself, to betray everything our family stands for." "What?" Akiran stepped forward, but the guards' weapons hummed with lethal intent. "Celeste, I was here the entire time. I didn't." "The evidence is already being broadcast across the planet," she cut him off. "Your private communications with the Stellar Syndicate. The technical specifications you provided them. The payment transfers." She held up a crystal data node, its surface swimming with damning information. "Everything." Akiran's mind raced. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity, the opposition to his reforms, the perfectly timed explosion, the immediate evidence. "This was planned," he said, looking at his sister with new eyes. "How long have you been working on this?" Celeste's expression never wavered. "Take him to the judgment chamber. The people will decide his fate." The trial, if it could be called that, lasted less than a day. Evidence mounted upon evidence, each piece more convincing than the last. Akiran watched as his life's work, his reputation, and his future were systematically destroyed. The public, already uncertain about his proposed reforms, turned against him completely. The sentence was exile, not to some comfortable distant world, but to the wasteland, the toxic desert that covered Luminara's southern hemisphere. It was a death sentence dressed as mercy. As they prepared him for exile, stripping him of all technology except the most basic survival gear, Celeste visited him one last time. "Why?" he asked simply. She studied him for a long moment. "Some things are bigger than family, brother. Bigger than you could understand." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I did love you." The transport dropped him in the heart of the wasteland as the acid storms were beginning. Akiran watched it disappear into the bruised sky, then turned to face the hostile landscape. The ground was cracked and burning, the air itself seemed to hate life, and the storms on the horizon promised worse to come. But they had made one mistake. They had left him his education, his knowledge, and most importantly, his determination to uncover the truth. As he began his trek across the burning sands, Akiran swore an oath to the uncaring sky. He would survive. He would discover who had really stolen the core. And he would show his people the truth, no matter the cost. The first acid rain began to fall, and Akiran pulled his protective cloak tighter. Somewhere in this wasteland, he would find answers. Somewhere in this dead land, he would discover hope. And somewhere, though he didn't know it yet, an ally was already on her way, one who would help him reshape the destiny of two worlds. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood before the Earth Science Council, her holographic presentation showing the devastating energy crisis affecting the outer colonies. The chamber's soft blue lighting reflected off her dark hair as she gestured to the projected data. The Luminite technology of Luminara represents our best hope for sustainable energy independence, she argued, her voice firm despite the Council's skeptical expressions. Their crystalline energy matrix is unlike anything we've developed. If we could establish a genuine scientific exchange. Dr. Rodriguez, interrupted Counselor Pierce, his aged face stern. We're aware of Luminara's technological advantages. We're also aware of their recent political instability. The theft of their core, the exile of their prince, hardly an ideal time for diplomatic overtures. Maya's jaw tightened. With respect, Counselor, that's exactly why we need to go now. The Stellar Syndicate's influence is growing. If we don't establish independent relations with Luminara, we risk losing access to this technology forever. After hours of debate, she received her authorization, but with strict limitations. One small research vessel, a 3-month window, and explicit instructions not to interfere in Luminaran politics. Maya accepted the terms while silently promising herself she would follow the evidence wherever it led. The journey to Luminara took 2 weeks in fold space. Maya spent the time studying everything she could access about the planet's recent upheaval. The official story about Prince Akiran's betrayal felt wrong, too neat, too convenient. Her research background had taught her that when evidence looked too perfect, it usually meant someone had manufactured it. Their ship, the Terra Nova, entered Luminaran orbit on a stormy morning. The planet's 3 moons created complex gravitational harmonics that their pilots struggled to navigate. Through the viewport, Maya watched the crystalline cities glitter beneath sheets of aurora-like energy, but her attention was drawn to the vast wasteland that dominated the southern hemisphere. The diplomatic reception was cordial but cold. Princess Regent Celeste greeted them in the Palace of Light, her silver skin almost blinding under the ceremonial illumination. Earth's scientific curiosity is admirable, she said, her golden eyes unreadable. But you'll understand if we keep certain technologies private, given recent events. Maya nodded diplomatically while studying the princess's face. There was something almost rehearsed about her words, as if she were performing for an unseen audience. The Stellar Syndicate representatives at the edges of the room watched every interaction like predators waiting to strike. That night, unable to sleep, Maya accessed the palace's public archives. She was running linguistic analysis on news reports from the day of the core's theft when her computer flagged something strange. The initial reports of Akiran's guilt had been time-stamped before the actual explosion. Someone had prepared the story in advance. A soft chime indicated a presence at her door. Maya quickly closed her files before opening it to find Thela, Akiran's former advisor, looking furtively over her shoulder. "You've been asking dangerous questions, Dr. Rodriguez," Thela whispered. "There are those who think you should stop. And there are a few of us who pray you won't." Maya drew her inside. "Tell me about Akiran. Not the official story, the truth." Thela's silver fingers twisted together. "He was working on something before the theft, a way to democratize Luminite technology. He believed he'd found a method to safely distribute energy processing to individual communities." She paused. "The prototype disappeared the same day he was exiled. The Syndicate's new energy distribution system looks remarkably similar. Is he alive? The wasteland is death itself. But..." Thela glanced at the window, where acid storms painted the sky in sickly colors. There have been energy signatures. Strange ones. Someone is surviving out there, using tech in ways we've never seen. Maya made her decision. Her official research would continue, maintaining her cover, but now she had a second mission. She would need supplies, protective gear, and most importantly, a way to slip past the surveillance systems that ringed the wasteland. "If I help you," Thela said, reading her intention, "they'll kill me if they find out." "If we don't help him," Maya replied, "they'll kill everything your world stands for." She held out her hand, a human gesture of partnership that Thela understood from her diplomatic training. Sometimes the right path is the one with the most thorns. As Thela clasped her hand, Maya's computer chimed again. The linguistic analysis had finished, revealing layers of encrypted data hidden in the public broadcasts. Someone had been using the news itself as a covert communication channel. And if Maya was right, somewhere in the wasteland, an exiled prince was listening. The next morning, Maya submitted a research request to study the wasteland's unique mineral formations. It was time to find out if her theory was correct, and if Earth's scientific expertise could help uncover a conspiracy that threatened two worlds. As she prepared her expedition, she remembered something her mentor used to say: "The greatest discoveries happen when we look where everyone else is afraid to search." The acid storms were gathering again on the horizon, and somewhere in that poisonous landscape, a truth waited to be found. Maya checked her protective gear one last time and smiled. She had always preferred fieldwork to politics anyway. The wasteland lived up to its reputation. Maya's expedition had been tracking the mysterious energy signatures for 3 days, their protective suits constantly being eroded by the caustic atmosphere. The ground beneath their feet was a maze of crystalline formations, twisted and blackened by centuries of acid storms. Dr. Rodriguez called out Lieutenant Chen, her security officer. "Storm front approaching. We need to find shelter within the next 20 minutes. Maya consulted her scanner, noting how the energy readings grew stronger toward a ridge of obsidian-like crystal formations. There. Those formations should provide enough cover. She didn't mention that the readings suggested they weren't natural formations at all. They had barely reached the crystal ridge when the storm hit. The acid rain came down in sheets, hissing against their protective gear. But Maya's attention was on her instruments, which were detecting a complex series of energy patterns emanating from deep within the formation. A hidden door opened silently beside them. "Inside," commanded a voice. "Unless you prefer dissolving." They hurried in, the door sealing behind them. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they found themselves in a surprisingly sophisticated chamber. Crystalline technology lined the walls, much of it jury-rigged from salvaged components. And in the center stood a figure Maya recognized from her research, though he looked very different from his royal portraits. Prince Akiran's once immaculate silver skin was now scarred with dark patterns, evidence of survival in the wasteland. His ceremonial robes had been replaced by practical gear integrated with crystalline technology. But his golden eyes were sharp and alert as he studied the intruders. "Dr. Maya Rodriguez," he said. "Earth's premier xenobiologist. Either you're the most dedicated researcher I've ever met, or you're here for something more than mineral samples." Maya removed her protective helmet. "Would you believe both? Your energy signature masking was brilliant, but it had a pattern. One that matched certain encrypted frequencies I found in public broadcasts." A slight smile crossed Akiran's face. "Thela's work. She always did love her puzzles." His expression hardened. "But why are you really here?" "Because the Stellar Syndicate's new energy distribution system is remarkably similar to your prototype. The one that vanished the day you were exiled." Maya pulled out a data crystal. "And because I found these." The crystal projected a series of financial transactions, communications, and technical specifications. "They didn't just steal your technology," Maya continued. "They're implementing it across 3 sectors, but with critical safeguards removed. The energy efficiency is higher, but the risk of catastrophic failure increases exponentially. Akiran's hands moved over a crystal console, bringing up his own collected data. They needed the core to perfect the process. My sister. He paused. Celeste thinks she's in control, but look at these patterns. The combined data revealed a complex web of manipulation. The Syndicate had spent years infiltrating Luminara's power structure, positioning Celeste as their unwitting puppet. The theft of the core wasn't just about energy technology, it was about controlling the only person who could have exposed their plan. They're not just after profit, Akiran said grimly. They're creating dependency. Once enough worlds rely on their version of the technology, they'll control the energy supply for half the galaxy. And without the proper safeguards, they'll have a built-in death switch for any world that resists, Maya finished. But we can prove it. Your original designs, combined with my analysis of their current system. A proximity alarm cut her off. Lieutenant Chen checked the security feeds. Multiple vehicles approaching. Military grade. Syndicate security, Akiran confirmed. They must have tracked your expedition. He pressed a crystal into Maya's hand. This contains everything I've discovered out here. If they find it. They won't, Maya interrupted. On Earth, we have a saying, the best place to hide something is in plain sight. She pulled out her research transmitter, designed to send geological data back to her ship. Help me encode your data into standard research packets. They'll be automatically uploaded to my secure academic database, masked as mineral analysis. They worked quickly, racing against the approaching security forces. Akiran's years of crystal technology expertise combined with Maya's encryption skills created a data package that would look like nothing more than routine scientific readings. There's one more thing, Maya said as they finished. Your sister. The evidence suggests she genuinely believes you're guilty. If we could reach her, show her how she's being manipulated. It would shatter the Syndicate's control over Luminara, Akiran nodded. But she's completely isolated in the palace. The Syndicate made sure of that. Maya smiled. Fortunately, I have a perfectly legitimate reason to request a private audience with the Princess Regent. After all, Earth's premier xenobiologist would naturally want to discuss the unique properties of Luminaran biology. The security vehicles were almost upon them. You need to go, Akiran said. Take the eastern tunnel. It'll lead you to a safe distance. Come with us, Maya urged. We can protect you. Akiran shook his head. I need to stay. Maintain the network. Keep collecting evidence. He met her eyes. But when you're ready to move against them, I'll be waiting. As Maya and her team hurried down the escape tunnel, she glanced back one last time. Akiran stood at his console, already beginning to erase traces of their presence. The exiled prince had become something new out here in the wasteland, not just a survivor, but a sentinel, patiently gathering the threads that would help them unravel a conspiracy that spanned the stars. The acid storm raged on overhead, but Maya smiled as she clutched the research transmitter. Sometimes the most powerful weapons weren't energy cores or military might, but simple things like truth and trust. The real storm, she knew, was just beginning. Sub-level 3 of the power facility was a maze of crystalline conduits and humming energy converters. Maya's modified shields flickered against the waves of destructive energy as she and Akiran fought their way through. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of battle as Celeste's forces engaged the Syndicate troops above. The core containment chamber should be through here, Akiran said, placing his hand on a sealed doorway. The security systems recognized his biological signature, something the Syndicate hadn't bothered to remove, believing he would never return from exile. The massive doors slid open to reveal a sight that made both of them freeze. The Luminite core, the heart of their planet's power, had been transformed. The Syndicate had integrated it into a massive device, its pure crystal structure now threaded with dark technological implants. By all the stars, Akiran breathed. They're not just trying to control it, they're trying to replicate it. Which explains the failed attempts we found in the financial records, Maya added, her scientific mind racing. They want to mass-produce artificial cores, control the galaxy's entire energy supply. Armed guards surrounded them before they could move closer. From behind the ranks of soldiers emerged a familiar face, Director Voss of the Stellar Syndicate, the architect of their conspiracy. Prince Akiran, Voss smiled coldly. And Dr. Rodriguez. I must thank you both. Your combined research helped us perfect the replication process. Of course, the first test will unfortunately destroy Luminara, but progress requires sacrifice. You'll die too, Maya said, buying time as she noticed something in the energy readings on her scanner. Voss gestured to a sleek ship docked in a hidden bay. We'll be safely away before the chain reaction begins. The destruction of Luminara will be blamed on terrorist action, and the Syndicate will generously offer our new power solution to the surviving worlds. Except it won't work, Akiran stated confidently. Maya glanced at him, seeing the subtle shift in his stance that told her he'd noticed the same thing she had. Your arrogance is astounding, Voss sneered. We have your research, your core, and your technology. But you don't understand it, Maya interrupted. Look at your own readings. The artificial integration is creating a quantum resonance cascade. The core isn't just a power source, it's alive. And it's rejecting your modifications. As if in response to her words, the core's crystal structure began to pulse with increasing intensity. The dark technological implants sparked and cracked. Voss's confident expression faltered as warning alarms blared. The containment field is failing, one of his technicians shouted. We need to evacuate. No. Voss drew his weapon. Initialize the replication sequence. If we're going to lose this facility, we'll take the entire planet with it. But Akiran was already moving. His years in the wasteland had taught him more about crystal energy than the Syndicate could ever understand. He placed his hands on the core's surface, his silver skin resonating with its frequency. Maya's shields expanded to protect him as raw power began to flow. Maya, he called out through gritted teeth. The stabilization sequence we developed in the wasteland. On it. She rushed to a control panel, inputting the calculations they'd perfected while hiding from Syndicate patrols. Around them, Voss and his soldiers were retreating as the chamber began to shake apart. The core's pulsing grew stronger, but now it was taking on a pattern. Through his connection, Akiran was teaching it to recognize the foreign elements, to purge them naturally rather than fighting them destructively. Maya's calculations provided the framework, turning chaotic energy into harmonic resonance. Voss reached his ship's ramp and turned for one final shot. The energy blast struck Maya's shield and reflected back, catching him squarely in the chest. He tumbled backwards as his own troops trampled over him in their panic to escape. The chamber's ceiling burst open as Celeste descended with a team of royal guards, their armor modified with the same shielding technology Maya had developed. Brother, she called out. The city is ours, but the energy grid is going critical. Not for long, Maya assured her, never taking her eyes off the readings. Akiran. The exiled prince's voice was strained but triumphant. The core is adapting. It's not just surviving, it's evolving. Learning to defend itself. His golden eyes opened, glowing with reflected power. Now, Maya. She activated the final sequence. The core flared with blinding light, and for a moment, the entire chamber was bathed in pure crystal energy. When it faded, the Syndicate's modifications had been completely absorbed and transformed. The core hung suspended in its cradle, more brilliant than ever. It's beautiful, Celeste whispered. And more powerful than before, Akiran added, stepping back as his connection faded. The Syndicate's attempts to replicate it accidentally taught it how to grow. To adapt. Maya's readings confirmed it. The energy output has increased by 300%, but it's completely stable. The core didn't just reject the foreign technology, it learned from it. Improved itself. Hours later, they stood in the Palace of Light's restored council chamber. The syndicate's surviving leaders were in custody, their conspiracy exposed to every world in the sector. Celeste had already begun the process of restoring Akiran's rights and titles, though he'd surprised everyone by suggesting a shared leadership. Luminara needs both of us, he'd told his sister. Your strength and my vision, working together instead of against each other. Maya watched the reunion from a quiet corner, her research transmitter busy sending the most remarkable scientific papers Earth would ever receive. A hand touched her shoulder, Thela, looking more relaxed than she had in years. Will you stay? The advisor asked. There's so much more we could learn together. Maya smiled, thinking of the possibilities. The core's evolution had opened up entirely new fields of crystal energy research. And there were other considerations too, especially when she caught Akiran looking her way. Earth needs this technology, she said. And Luminara needs allies it can trust. I think there's plenty of work for an ambitious xenobiologist. Above the palace, the eternal acid storms of the wasteland were finally beginning to clear. The core's increased power was gradually healing the atmosphere, transforming the poisoned land into something new and fertile. Like the planet itself, what had once been a place of exile was becoming a source of hope. Akiran joined them at the window, his scars now marks of pride rather than shame. They say every end is just a new beginning, he mused. I never thought my exile would lead to this. That's the thing about science, Maya replied, taking his hand. And about people. Sometimes the most remarkable discoveries come from the darkest places. We just have to be brave enough to look. Together, they watched the first true sunset Luminara had seen in centuries, its light reflecting off the crystal spires in endless patterns of possibility. The story of the banished prince and the human scientist who helped save his world would be told for generations. But for now, they simply stood in comfortable silence, watching their new dawn unfold.